All right. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to share with you an overview of the latest Metasys release, Metasys Release 11. We know how busy all of you are, especially in today's climate, so we really sincerely appreciate you taking a precious hour of your day today to join us for this event. We're really excited, and we hope you are too at the end. So, with that, before we jump into the agenda and the content, I wanted to take a minute to introduce today's presenters. So first up, we have Mark Bertolin, who is a Controls Business Development Manager, and in his role, he works closely with the Johnson Controls product development, training, marketing, and sales teams. He's been in the building automation industry since 2002 and has held various roles, including technical field support, business development, and product management. His experience in supporting the products and technology for energy management and sustainability projects in both Canada and the US has allowed for a unique perspective on the benefits, trends, and challenges of the smart connected building automation system. And Mark joins us today from the Toronto area. Mike Kenworthy is a Metasys Controls Sales Support Manager for Johnson Controls and joins us today from Atlanta. He brings over 25 years of engineering and sales experience and has focused his career on controls, industrial and building automation, and energy management. He's held various positions as a senior engineer, sales director, and account business developer. For the last 5.5 years, Mike has been with the Metasys products account management team, which promotes a future smart BAS, allowing users to easily navigate buildings and spaces from any mobile device. And my name is Jane Walmsley. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager responsible for the Johnson Controls Global Building Automation System portfolio. I am joining today from Milwaukee, our very snowy global headquarters, and will be acting as today's facilitator. So the agenda for today's event is pretty simple. I'll just step through it quickly here. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about the Johnson Controls OpenBlue Healthy Buildings and Metasys. And then we'll move into what's new with Metasys software, particularly our Metasys user interface and the modernization of that interface. We'll talk about then next what's new with Metasys hardware, including our next generation hardware platform, which includes equipment and supervisory controllers. Then we'll conclude with a section on cybersecurity, and we'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A. So like all of our Metasys webinars, today's webinar will be recorded and be made available to you shortly after the live event. So for those of you who would like to share this with colleagues who may not have been able to join, you will be getting a copy of not only the recording, but a copy of today's presentation. And although the Q&A will be saved for the last 10 to 15 minutes, we invite you to submit your questions at any point during today's presentation through the questions panel in your GoToWebinar menu bar. And we'll do our best to get those answered in the time that we have provided. If for whatever reason we run out of time, we'll be sure to address any unanswered questions in a frequently asked questions document published after the live event. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark to kick things off.
Thank you, Jane. I'm having a bit of an issue with the presentation, so I'll just click through the slides with you here. OpenBlue Healthy Buildings. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about OpenBlue. Many of you hopefully have heard of our digital solution and our Healthy Buildings platform. Really, it's a comprehensive suite of connected solutions to help drive sustainability goals, building health, and an array of outcomes. And Johnson Controls really just show we're continue to be a provider of these types of solutions to make buildings healthier. And obviously, that's more important now than ever. So as we transition to the next slide, if you look at the overall OpenBlue platform, again, a variety of solutions to meet various outcomes and goals, and Metasys really, and that's what we're here to talk about, is a key component of that overall solution. So a lot of stuff going on in this slide here, but if we sort of look down at the OT level or the operational technology level, BMS and energy management, again, Metasys is an integral part of digital solution and the healthy buildings and platforms that we have living on and above the building automation system. So, again, Metasys helps building systems be more secure, again, cybersecurity best practices, and seamlessly helps integrate things like fire security, lighting, other operational technologies to help future-proof buildings and really provide a platform to serve all that information up again, within the building automation system, Metasys itself, but those other platforms and solutions that reside above it. So as we transition to the next slide and look at, Metasys integrations and really Metasys today. So, we look at the different technologies and solutions that we have under the Metasys umbrella, and we talk about open protocols like, obviously Metasys MSTP, BACnet, BACnet IP, Zigbee, wireless to BACnet IP, and a variety of other integration protocols and platforms being offered. So, really, the Metasys system itself is, at the heart of it all, a BAS HVAC control system, but can do much more. Obviously collecting, summarizing, presenting reports on the building data. As time goes on and the user interfaces get better, smarter, it enables speedier troubleshooting and reduces time on tasks. Obviously managing energy usage. I mean, that's one of the primary points of a building automation system. Metasys does a great job of that with everything that it does offer. So, you're really left with enhanced productivity, effectiveness, better overall visibility of your buildings and systems with Metasys, because Metasys really does enable integrations now and into tomorrow as we look at these types of capabilities and expectations that many will have for a building automation system in Metasys in general. So as we move into the next slide, we see 30 years. Unbelievable. Metasys turns 30 this year, if you didn't know. And for some of you that have been on this, that are on this call, you've been around since day one. I unfortunately haven't been, but I've seen, a lot of what's happened in the last 10 years, and it's exciting. So as time goes on, we're not slowing down. 30 is great. We can celebrate that, but at each release that comes of Metasys now and into the future, there's even more stuff packed in there. We're making sure that the features and benefits that our customers are asking for are included in there. And I think we're doing a great job, as you can see with some of the recent releases here. We list from 10 to 11 and then into 12, you'll see in fall. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there and a lot of really useful things. So, on this call, we're going to obviously look at some of the key features and benefits available through the products and software at Metasys 11, but we'll also touch on some of the other key features from some of the recent releases of Metasys as well, that 10, 10.1, and previous. So addressing key needs and challenges, things are changing, and they have changed. And I'm not just specifically talking about COVID-19. I mean, obviously that's pretty obvious with everything going on here and things changing relative to that. But really, the people managing and running buildings, new workforce, less experience, we're seeing that across the board. So, how does Metasys help, work for you? How does it make staff be more proactive, identify, fix issues quickly? Can it self-diagnose itself? These systems become smarter and smarter and smarter. What's available to me now? How does it make learning curve easier? How does it make my people more efficient? Remote access is obviously very important, again, now more than ever, as well as a user-friendly interface as well. So what does that look like? How does it help my people when they're on the go? Nobody's tied to a desk. Everybody's doing something, whether they're in a building or outside of a building, right? What does that look like? And what are the efficiencies to be gained with Metasys? And we're going to look at that. What's new? I have existing equipment, existing controllers, existing infrastructure. What can I do? Why should I upgrade? How should I upgrade? These are my needs. These are some of the things that I need to accomplish. How does the system enable me to do that? What's available to me? So, we're going to address what that looks like, again, at Metasys 11 and with some of the recent releases as well. And obviously, IT security. So, now more than ever, people are very concerned, as they should be, with cybersecurity. So, what are we doing from a Metasys standpoint? And we've got a great story that we're going to talk to here as the presentation goes on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's going to talk about what's new with software.
All right, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. And hello, everybody. Appreciate your time and being with us here today. We're going to start, like Jane said, with what's new in Metasys software. But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about our user interface. As we developed the new Metasys user interface, we really took a look at what we were doing in the past, and what was done for the most part in the past was really associated with the building network tree, which wasn't all that intuitive to operators, and certainly not to our end users in the environment itself. So we wanted to build, with the new Metasys user interface, a much better look into the system that was all based on spaces and the relationships that equipment have to spaces, because no end user is going to call up and tell you that NAE1 is causing me to be hot. They're always going to talk to you about, I'm in the building 7 in the east wing, and I'm in room A, and I'm hot. That's their perspective. So we wanted to make sure that not only did we set up the navigation from their perspective that way, navigating by space, but also associate all the equipment to spaces, so that when we get to a space, we can understand exactly what pieces of equipment are affecting that space. And that's the way the new user interface is built from the ground up. Not only is it built as a completely mobile and remote-based user interface, but also built from the ground up to be intuitive with the relationships between spaces and equipment already pre-assigned. So there's no searching around for what piece of equipment is associated with this VMA device, for example. So as we move to the next slide, we kind of see that in action here. We've got navigation by space on the left-hand panel that you would typically navigate through on a network perspective. Now it's all by space. And even the searches are all now by space. So if you want to search for a specific place in your campus, all you have to do is start typing it in, and it will get you right to the space that you are interested in doing troubleshooting on. So like Mark was saying, this really minimizes time on task and the learning associated with navigating through a particular building on a building automation system. Highly intuitive. We've had operators that look at this from new construction environment and really start operating a building effectively within a day. It's that intuitive. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation here. That's the foundation we're building off of, and we want to take you even farther than that. Really, we are modernizing what we used to call the site management portal. That is the older version of the user interface, and moving all of our customers to the newer Metasys user interface. And that's what you're going to see today for the most part in our presentation. So we can move to the next slide and start to talk about some of the super exciting features that are part of our Metasys 11 release. Fault detection and fault triage is probably the most exciting part of our new release. These are add-on features to Metasys, so they are licensed features. But I would tell you that they pay back in the license fee within 3 to 6 months when it comes to actually using these features and gaining the return on investment that you are able to by taking these features and really acting upon them. So I want to talk a little bit about fault detection first, and really what a fault is. When you think about alarms, we tend to alarm everything, right? And that a lot of times leads to nuisance alarms. With fault detection, we're able to, number one, eliminate a lot of those nuisance alarms. Take, for example, an air handler. Perhaps that air handler is pushing out air that's too cold, and maybe that is because a valve, a cooling valve, is stuck open. Well, we certainly want to know about that condition, but today what we would do is probably set up an alarm on that. And there's plenty of reasons why an air handler might push out colder air for a short period of time. and you just get a nuisance alarm because of that. Well, what fault detection does is add to the algorithm, so you can eliminate that alarm in favor of a fault. So the fault is going to look at all of the different trends that are coming from the air handler, and look at those over time, and whether the occupied period of time is going on, and whether that stays at a low condition for a longer period of time than it should be. It's also going to look at zones. So, when you have colder air being pushed out of an air handler into a zone, the zone may be reheating that air, and the zone may be perfectly satisfied, which means there's no alarm going on, but still you're heating and cooling simultaneously, which is certainly wasting energy, and more than likely exposing your equipment to runtime failures over time, because it's having to work harder to satisfy the conditions that it was set up to do design-wise without the faults occurring. So, fault detection is an extremely important part of that. Being able to detect those kind of things, an air handler pushing out too much cold air, is extremely important to know, but doesn't have to be an alarm per se, but it should be a fault that you look at as a common part of the day. The thing that we don't want to do is have a human running around looking for all these faults, right? Nobody has the time to do that. So we want the BAS system to do that, and that is really what fault detection allows us to do. So if we can move on to the next slide there. So with fault detection, we get into the actual types of faults that we can see here. So here we've got a VAV low zone temperature fault. And you can see some of the criteria that are set up for that. So the system must be unoccupied for a minimum amount of time. The zone air temperature must be less than the differential between the set point and the error. So a whole number of different trends come into this particular fault. And this is something certainly no human is going to have the time to look at on a regular basis, but the system, the BAS, can look at this 24 hours a day and determine when these faults occur. And it can show us, how many of these faults have occurred over time, and start giving us a prioritized list of what is the most severe fault in the building, or really a prioritized list of faults by severity, if you will. So if we can move on to the next. So here we can see, the point, and we can look at all of the different parameters that are associated with that point. All of the trend information is available here. The activity that we see below that is available, so it's showing, when the faults are occurring. So you can really get a knowledge over time of what's being faulted, and what piece of equipment is having the trouble. You can see the details up at the upper left-hand corner of the screen there, the piece of equipment, the space that's being affected, the duration that a fault has occurred for, and really then get a very good idea of the severity of the fault. Okay, so as that fault has occurred and is now going back into the normal condition, we can see the normal condition taking back over here. So we can see the fault basically being resolved. This is after the operator has taken a look at this and noticed the problem, and then gone in there and taken an action. So we do want to make sure, this is a actionable intelligence type of dashboard. Without action, there's no return on investment, right? So we want to make sure this is part of an operator's day. Typically, we see this being looked at on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis. And a lot of times in a meeting with various maintenance personnel, so that we can take action on the highest severity faults first, and then basically save the most amount of energy and have the least amount of equipment failure based on taking care of these faults on a severity prioritized basis. So if we move on. So now we're getting into a portion of the fault detection called fault triage. And as I mentioned before, the fault detection and the fault triage are licensable features. So if fault triage is also something that you would like to take advantage of, we can add that to the system, and now you're going to get a knowledge base of causes for a particular fault. So again, we're looking at a VAV low zone temperature fault here. And now it is actually giving us possible causes for that fault. So a new operator, or even a seasoned operator, that is maybe not familiar with the building can really start to take action immediately without having to try to understand what's going on in the system, because you're going to get those possible causes. And this knowledge base is built on over 150 years of Johnson Controls BAS knowledge and HVAC knowledge. So this has got a huge knowledge base of information built in already. And then you can add to that knowledge base by looking at the causes, going through the different solutions, and actually indicating whether it solved the issue or if it didn't solve the issue. So you're actually building up that knowledge base over time by actually fixing the issues, so that when you go back and maybe this issue occurs again, now you have not only the possible causes, but the fixes that were attempted and the ones that solve the problem most often. So extremely powerful feature. Hopefully you can see that this really can pay back based on the cost of these. Really, we've seen payback in 3 to 6 months for these type of things pretty easily. So you can see the solved issue there as Jane moves through. So you will also get an indication of when these things were solved and what solution solved it, and get a real timeline behind the entire process. I'll also note that you can add customized notes to the resolution. So not only do you get to input what solution actually solved the problem, but you can add to that knowledge base with notes over time. So here, one of the technicians was going to be working with a torch in space and over the damper unnecessarily. That was the reason. If you wanted to put in more of a note around what the solution was, you could certainly do that. And that just becomes part of the database of knowledge that we've added to the system here. Okay. So extremely powerful tool set. I want to make sure everybody has a chance, and I know some questions are coming through, so we'll certainly get to those answers. But extremely powerful set of licensable features there. We did add some other ones as well. Each one of our releases does add to our user interface enhancements. Over the last few releases, we've added things like Alarm Manager, which also helps with nuisance alarms, right? When we get a lot of nuisance alarms, and every system has them, although we are trying to eliminate a bulk of them with fault detection and fault triage. If you do get those nuisance alarms, you want those rolled up to a single line. You don't want 50 different lines of nuisance alarms in your alarm manager. So our alarm manager built into the user interface does exactly that. It rolls up alarms and helps you quickly identify and prioritize those alarms so that you're not missing critical alarms in a whole bunch of rows of nuisance alarms. Things like photorealistic graphics, you can see the fan actually running here. That's important to an operator. It's not just a pretty picture. It also means something. If you can actually visualize that a fan is in operation, certainly from a safety standpoint, you want to know if those things are running or not, especially if you're doing service work on a particular air handler. We do have our graphics manager built in, an HTML5 graphics manager built into the product now. So that you don't need a separate tool to go in and modify graphics. Anybody can go in and modify those graphics. You don't need a service call out to our branches to do a simple graphic modification. You can certainly do all that yourself. And then things like advanced search and reporting, especially for our hospital customers. I see a lot of customers use this from a reporting standpoint for Joint Commission and things like that. Able to quickly find data within the system and build a report on it ad hoc is extremely powerful. You can also schedule those reports out to an email box or to a drive, a network drive, so you can automatically build reports and have them created to those emails or to those drives and have them ready to go when needed. So now that we've talked a little bit about the software, I want to jump into a little bit about what's new with Metasys hardware. So you can see the new generation of field controllers, and we also have a new generation of engines. They all take on this nice new curved legacy. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide there some of the older level devices, and moving to the right-hand side of the slide, you can see sort of in that pyramid look the newer, more modern look and feel that we're building into all of the devices coming out of our factories now. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these as we go forward. So we can move on to the next. So our next generation equipment controllers, since we introduced these in 2018, we introduced a general purpose controller and a VAV box controller. Some of the key features that we introduced with these are our background transfer ability. This gives you the ability to download new programs, fully new sequences into the controller without switching the old program off. So you can download these sequences into the controller, and then at a non-critical point in your day, you can reboot that controller and it can switch on to the new sequence extremely quickly. So you're almost provided a bumpless transfer here by downloading that. That's the real bulk of the time commitment. You can download that in the background and then decide what time to really initialize that that program into the foreground at a non-critical point in your day. We do also offer the BACnet MSTP and N2 networking with auto detect. That applies to wireless as well. So all of those things, will automatically detect whether they are on wireless or BACnet MSTP or N2 without you having to create that switching in the controller itself. That's automatic. All of the high capacity and memory processing are ready to take on more and more demanding applications in the future. Certainly some of the future readiness is also built in with that background transfer. And then we do have some physical enhancements that you can probably see on the controller, things like removable terminal blocks and rotary address switches that allow you to address a controller without having to memorize things like binary and that type of thing. So a lot of enhancements to the controller sets introduced in 2018, and now we're going to introduce a couple new things to you as well with version 11. So you can see the new model of CGM. When we introduced the CGM in 2018, we had a 9 input and 9 output model. This is now a 4 input and 6 output model. You can see the model names actually have some good information right in the model name itself. It gives you the inputs and the outputs. And this is a lower I/O count general purpose application controller for smaller, probably less sophisticated types of equipment, maybe fan coil units, simple air handlers, and gives you a more cost-effective option for that line. So just a flexibility option for adding to the new models of CGMs. We've also introduced a new model for the VAV controller. So again, we introduced the CVM 0305 in 2018. Now with Rev 11, we are introducing a model with position feedback from the actuator. So there is a potentiometer now in the actuator model that gives you true feedback on the position of the damper actuator, which is great, especially for customers that are out there that want to take advantage of a true feedback. Before we were relying on a command position, and that reliance was making the command at 50%, and we didn't have really any feedback. A lot of times that that damper was actually positioning itself at 50%. Now we have that exact position of the damper itself without having to add a secondary actuator. So that's all built right now into the model that we introduced with version 11, with the P on the end. So nice new additions there. A few new expansion modules also just to add to the new look and feel. We're introducing a series of XPM IO modules. So this just expands the IO in the system. These can be used on any of the new systems or any of the existing systems. So all of we take our mantra of leave no customer behind very seriously, and we want to be able to add these things to new systems and to existing systems, and really vice versa. So you can see some of the options you can add to SA bus or FC bus on existing systems. These are all mix and match with any of your older systems as well, but just adding to the expansion IO capabilities with a new look and feel. So that takes us through some of the controller options. Let's move up the pyramid here to the next generation of network engines. So just as we did with the controllers in 2019, we introduced a new version of the network engines. These became known as the supervisory network engines and supervisory network controllers. The biggest, major difference here was the smaller design. That right out of the box, you can kind of see that. These are the size of small laptops or even tablets versus what looked like a pretty big computer beforehand. So all of the engines now have a similar look and feel. They're all the same footprint. They all have batteryless operations, so we retain the critical pieces of information over a power failure using a supercapacitor versus a battery, which just means you don't have to go around and change batteries every once in a while or worry about batteries going dead. That is all part of the new engine platform. Similar background file transfer to what we do with our controllers. Now you can background file transfer to the engines all of the database information without having to restart those engines. You can do that in the background, and then again at a non-critical moment, you can basically initiate that the new database take over, and that will happen in a period of minutes versus in some cases the download could take quite a bit of time. We'll talk a little bit more about cybersecurity when Mark takes back over and talks a little bit about FIPS. We'll talk at some length about that, but I do want to make sure that everybody understands that FIPS is part of our engine platform now with version 11. So that is something we were introduced with version 11. With all the engines, though, we introduced the Linux OS and the Secure Boot as part of the feature set. So you also have the confidence in going through a boot with these engines without any kind of virus being introduced or any kind of malicious actors getting in there trying to hack through the boot process. So that is part of the cybersecurity features of the engines as well. So if we move on to some of the integration flexibility, with again the newer engines, we wanted to introduce as much integration flexibility as possible. And Mark mentioned some of this when we looked at the architecture slide. All of the integrations are built into the engine. There's no need to license or go through any updates for any of these integrations to be used. All of these integrations are part of the engines coming out of the box. And with version 11, you'll see at the bottom there, we did introduce the OPC UA integration into the engines itself. So all of these integrations are part of Rev 11. We've also moved to BACnet Protocol Revision 18 with all of these engines. So that's also what you can expect with the engines out of the box. So I do want to spend a little time here specifically on the supervisory network engine, the supervisory network controller, the SNC that you see there. So the supervisory network controller is a combination of network engine and controller in the same box, basically here. And we've added a really cool new color display to that model there. You can see the color display on the model there as we kind of zoom in. You can see some of the really cool look and feel. You know, this is something that you can easily use for handoff auto operations. You can use it for trending operations. Now with the neat new color display, you can actually see trends on the model. And this is all password protected. So, you know, rather than having handoff auto switches in a panel or something along those lines, this just adds a lot more security to that handoff auto operation. Typically, this is all meant for local operation of a particular piece of equipment or maybe a chiller plant. You know, this really goes to doing that local operation, but certainly doing it in a secure manner through password protection and having that really cool looking little color display that you can navigate through with some easy navigation, and then it's a lot more intuitive than the old 4-line LCD display. So some really new cool enhancements to really our whole product pyramid there from top to bottom. Some of the other things that you know, we've added here to the SNC, 2 Ethernet ports. This allows you to put that SNC in a daisy chain with other IP-based controllers. Mark's going to talk a little bit more about IP-based controllers here in a second. But now we can get that SNC in that daisy chain of IP controllers, and we can use the trunks that you see over there for other integrations. So, you know, maybe all of the controllers are in that daisy chain, but we want to integrate a rooftop unit that's MSTP or a VFD that's SA bus. That can all happen in that same daisy chain. Just use the trunks off of the SNC to do some of that integration. So really nice new additions to the SNC model that I think you guys will really enjoy. So I think with that, we're going to turn it back over to Mark, and Mark's going to go through a little bit more on the IP architecture and some of our super exciting cybersecurity features that we've released with 11 as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, scalability is important to us, right? And we look at sort of where things are going, and a lot of our customers and consultants in certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world are looking at Ethernet-based or IP-based building automation architecture. So to your point, the SNC with 2 Ethernet ports allows some flexibility on how we implement an IP solution, again, daisy chaining underneath that. But you know, again, on the right-hand side, they're looking at some of the other topologies and ways. Again, these are BACnet IP-based controllers versus the MSTP that we looked at earlier. Different ways of networking those controllers to achieve as far as I'm concerned, an industry-leading IP architecture related to building automation system. And if we look at the next slide, you know, I think some of what's driving, you know, IP adoption, obviously convergence with, you know, IT and OT, common networking platforms, the future, what's coming, and flexibility. You know, we look at things like flattening of the architecture. We hear that a lot with IP. Things are changing. You know, the architecture of building automation is changing. Well, for us, it has changed if we wanted to. We can actually virtualize that supervisory layer into a server now. So instead of having boxes out in mechanical rooms, engine supervisors out there overlooking field controllers, we have the option of virtualizing that and putting it into a server. So again, less things in the field, flattening architecture, that tier 2 sort of floats into the server. Like we looked at, you know, the controllers at Metasys 11, and you know, as we move forward, with our product line, you can do more and more and more and more down at the edge, if you will, down at the field level. So, that middle layer starts to kind of, move one way or the other down to the field level or maybe up into the server. So from a flexibility standpoint, again, we have the ability to do it both ways. And there's things driving that around cybersecurity, keeping, better visibility on that supervisory layer in one place, keeping, everything up to date in one place instead of in different spots around a mechanical room. Redundant options as well related to the supervisor and server, even flexibility on how we lay out a system and how it's wired up and what needs to be powered. So there's drivers that are moving people to more of a flatter architecture. So we're doing that and offering that as an option. And we move into the next slide. So in line with that, obviously backed at MSTP is the way we, the industry's been doing it since 2003, let's say, and really MSTP into the 90s as far as that wire technology goes. And then moving into the IP world, what's interesting are the new topologies that are available and more resilient options that become available now that we can employ in our architecture. Things like ring topology, which is newer to us in building automation. That's been around the IP world for quite a while, but allows us to offer a much more resilient networking option for the field level. Cybersecurity enhancements. So getting into Metasys 11 features and what we're offering and what we have, I guess, in the last couple of revs and what we continue to harden within 11.0 is the cyber health dashboard. We won an award for this when it first came out, and this is a really clear way of an admin user for Metasys, somebody that manages users to very quickly see any potential security issues are maybe associated with users of Metasys. So what accounts are not in line with cybersecurity best practices? And it will not only show you that, it'll actually give you a path on how to fix that or how to make modifications to make those accounts more secure. Things like passwords never set to lockout, etc. It'll actually show you your system components as well, the hardware that's installed on site, what rev it's at, what has the ability to be upgraded, and also user activity, who's logging into the site successfully and maybe even more importantly, unsuccessfully, to get you better visibility on what's happening sort of behind the scenes. We talked about a Linux OS and secure boot down at the engine level. So again, just a more secure platform and offering that Mike had talked about earlier. Server and supervisor level encrypted communications utilizing TLS 1.2 or HTTPS. Giving certificates as an option there. It's just a more secure encrypted communication that's happening at that level to make the information going back and forth on Metasys much more secure. And then of course, we're in line with cybersecurity best practices around password management, unused ports, and being able to firewall off certain components within our system, make it more secure. And again, identifying things like we talked about in the cyber health dashboard related to accounts and passwords. A very important feature at Metasys 11 is FIPS 140-2, so Federal Information Processing Standards. And this is a standard we see in U.S. federal government specifications. We're starting to see it more in other vertical markets too, like banking, data centers, hospitals. And so, again, that is a type of encryption and security technique that your product is basically certified that it's employing to, again, offer further security within the building automation system. So any of our products at the supervisory level that come with Metasys 11 out of the factory will have this automatically in it. Also, any existing engines or supervisory controllers that we have that get upgraded in the field to 11 will, again, have FIPS 140-2 automatically on board. And that'd be level 1 compliance certification at that level. At the server level, that becomes an option, a licensable feature. So if we want the server down to the engines as well, all FIPS 140-2, that's an option. But right out of the box, you get this with Metasys 11 and our supervisory layer. And just to round it out, Active Directory Federation services and two-factor authentication. So again, single sign-on. So, you know, if a customer or organization wants to use their enterprise username and passwords or accounts to access Metasys, you're able to do that for, you know, maybe a more secure way of accessing the billing automation system. Also, two-factor authentication as well. So signing on, making it a little bit harder for somebody that may not have the ability to get in. And then some enhancements to the cyber health dashboard, like being able to export reports out of that screen to be able to share with, you know, IT to make sure that, you know, what we're doing at the Metasys billing automation level is in line with what an organization's, you know, IT policy may be around users or how we approach certain things. And with that, I'll throw it back over to Jane.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mike. I see a lot of great questions coming in, some of which are being answered kind of on a one-on-one basis, but we'll make sure to get to as many of these as possible. But real quickly before we do that, we did want to, you know, we presented a lot of information to you about, you know, what's new with Metasys at version 11 and in the last couple of releases going into Metasys 11. But we want to hear from you. What are you, you know, most interested in hearing more about in terms of you know, building automation? Is it cybersecurity? Is it BACnet IP networking? Is it modernizing legacy systems, identifying and troubleshooting issues, or equipment and supervisory controllers? What are you most concerned about, or what topics would you most benefit from learning more about? So give just a few seconds, up to a minute here, for folks to log their responses, and then we'll start digging into the Q&A. All right, so we're just at about a minute, so I'm going to head and close the poll down, and then we'll share those results here. So, okay, so looks like about 28% of you said that you're most interested in hearing more about modernizing legacy systems, followed closely by BACnet IP networking, then equipment and supervisory controllers, and a tie for cybersecurity and identifying and troubleshooting issues. So that's really helpful for us to understand, and hopefully, you know, as you start to learn more about what the latest version of Metasys provides, we can better connect some of those, you know, needs and concerns with our latest Metasys release. So with that, we are going to start answering some questions, and I'm sure we are going to run out of time to answer everything, and I see a lot of really great, insightful, in-depth questions coming in. So let's see here. I'm going to close the poll down here really quick before we jump back into the presentation. So first question, and I think this is a great question, Mike. When you were talking about fault detection and fault triage, how does that feature set prioritize faults?
Yeah, so faults are prioritized in a couple different ways. Certainly there are some rankings based on severity, and those are based on some of the knowledge that we put into the fault detection system. They're also based on duration, so over time, you know, faults do occur, and based on the frequency of occurrence and the duration for those faults to be in error condition, that also comes into the severity prioritization. And there are parameters that you can set to sort of make sure that that severity is correct for your site. Some sites may be a little bit different than others, so there are some parameter sets that we can change to make sure that that's matched to your site.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And another great question, does Metasys 11 have the ability to generate alarm performance reports, and do those reports include the fault conditions that you referenced earlier in the presentation?
Yeah, so both the alarm management system and the fault detection and fault triage have exportable reports that can be generated. So all of that information can be exportable as a report. In fact, we have customers that regularly take these fault reports to maintenance meetings, and that's what they discuss basically for prioritization of the week's maintenance, that kind of thing. So yes, that can be done.
Okay, great. And you touched on it briefly, the ability to add a note when a fault is resolved or tracking its progress. When a note is added, and maybe you can expand a little bit, Mike, on some of the other note logging capabilities, but when a note's added, can the user go back and edit or delete them, or are the notes permanent?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to have to answer whether they can go be edited after the fact. We'll probably have to answer that in a separate Q&A. I'm not sure whether they can be answered after the fact, but I know we can add those notes to not only faults and those types of things, but also alarms. So we can definitely add those notations. Once the notations are added, they're saved in the database, so we certainly can go back and view them. Whether we can go back and edit them, though, I'll have to check and see if that is something we do system-wide.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then so if lots of questions around some of the compliance with FIPS 140-2. So if we talked about how at this particular release, Metasys servers and network engines are FIPS 140-2 level 1 compliant. What about previous versions like version 10 or 10.1?
Right. So all of the engines that can be upgraded to release 11 do have the capability to go to a FIPS compliant version. So really that's the older 55-2s and -3s that can be upgraded to Rev 11. So if you do have those in your system, they can be made FIPS compliant. All the new SNEs and SNCs obviously coming out today, whether they're 10 or 10.1 or Rev 11, those can be upgraded to Rev 11 to make them FIPS compliant. You do have to be at Rev 11 to be FIPS compliant, so just be aware of that.
Okay, and I think you kind of started touching on this, but outside of the context of FIPS 140-2, just generally speaking, can the version 10 supervisory controllers be updated to version 11? I think you addressed that pretty well, but do you know if there's any memory issues if someone were to upgrade from 10 to 11?
No, we've tested extensively with the engines that are able to go to Rev 11. So the older 55-2s and 3s, they are acceptable at Rev 11. Obviously, all the new engines that we're coming out with at Gen 4, those are all 10 and 11 compliant and foreseeable future. Obviously with all the new versions that will come out as well.
Okay, great. And for existing sites who have an ADX, that's one of our Metasys servers, and that would like to utilize FIPS 140-2, so I think maybe they would, if they were to purchase an add-on license, are there version restrictions? So would they need to, is there a certain version of Metasys that they've got an ADX they would have to be at to get that FIPS 140-2?
Yeah, so Rev 11 is the only version that is FIPS compliant, and you do, if you want a compliant site, including the engines, all of those engines also have to be at Rev 11 to be FIPS compliant. So when we say FIPS, just think Rev 11, right? So make sure all of your devices are at the latest and greatest. If you want to use FIPS, or if that's part of your requirements for your site, just make sure all of your devices can go to Rev 11.
Okay, great, thank you, Mike. Another great question on upgrading, kind of in a different direction. That would be someone who has, like, for example, Metasys version 8. We touched on it briefly when we were talking about Metasys UI around the new graphics that are available. Maybe you could talk a little bit about modernizing maybe legacy graphics into a later version of Metasys with the UI and the ability to view graphics, and then what some of the, maybe a little more detail into some of the newer graphics.
Sure. Yeah. So the older graphics are built on a couple technologies, but one of them is Silverlight, which is a Microsoft product that is at end of support. So we do want to modernize the graphics as much as possible. All of the graphics are available, even the older graphics, the standard graphics, and the what we called GGT graphics or Graphics Plus. All of those graphics are available in the Metasys user interface, and they do not require Silverlight in the Metasys user interface. They will port over to that without any problem. And as customers are modernizing, we want to make sure we are getting up to the latest and greatest graphics. So certainly any new construction, I would definitely say go with the newer graphics that are built into the Metasys user interface. Again, all that tool set is built right into the Metasys user interface. So there's no additional tools that you have to buy. And they can coexist, right? So if you have some older graphics that you haven't ported over yet, and you want to build some new graphics in the new user interface, those can coexist. So there's no problem with that as you migrate your entire site, hopefully eventually over to the newer graphics.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Earlier you talked about, the space-based navigation in the new Metasys user interface that can better show, which controllers are connected to or associated with a building or a space within a building. So with that Metasys user interface, can you get down to the level of detail where you can show exactly the type of controller in that building space, like the down to the model number?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to show that, we can certainly show the model number of the controller on a graphic. That's definitely possible. We also do show that. We still have access to the all items tree, which is a standard part of the Metasys network level. But if you want to show that in the space and the equipment related to the space, you could certainly get down to that level and show the model number. We've even had people link the model number documents. If you want to actually link to a PDF document of the controller model number, we certainly have that capability within the user interface as well. So we can get down to that level.
Okay, great. Okay, I think this will probably be our last or second to last question. So are the new SNEs and SNCs compliant or compatible with BACnet IP controllers?
Yes, they all the newer SNEs and SNCs are compatible with the BACnet IP controllers. Even the older 55 engines, the 2s and the 3s, and really the 2s and the 3s are compatible with BACnet IP controllers, so they can be used to do an integration for BACnet for our JCI BACnet IP controllers, or for other BACnet IP controllers as well.
Okay, great. And I think this will probably be our last question. This will be our last question because I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. And for those of you who have, again, lots of really great, insightful questions coming in, we will make sure to answer all of these in a follow-up communication. But this final question, we're getting a lot of questions around the NAE 55s or the NAE 5510-3, for example. Can those be upgraded to Metasys 11?
So yes, they can be upgraded to Metasys 11. Any customer that wants to move those older engines to the newer platform, we have no problem with that. In fact, we have some promotions going on. So reach out to your branch and ask about promotions for upgrading those. But we also want to be, certainly super sensitive about, maintaining the investment that you've put into those controllers. And the 55-2 can be upgraded to Rev 11, and the 55-3 can be upgraded to Rev 11. The 55-3 will even be able to upgrade to revs in the future as well. So that will be fine for anybody that has some of those older engines.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mark. Again, and thank you most of all to all of you for joining us today. We know how busy you are. Again, lots of great questions. We'll make sure to answer any of those that we didn't get to in a follow-up document. recording and the PDF copy of the presentation will also be sent out. If you have any questions at all in the meantime, let your Johnson Controls representative know, or you feel free to start exploring a little bit more about Metasys 11 on the link posted to the side. And with that, thank you so much. Stay safe and stay well, and have a great afternoon, evening. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.